Okay, I'm gonna bounce it off the steps, over to the office. It's gonna hit the slide, bounce all the way back. It's gonna roll across the parking lot, nothing but nets. Well, my friends, I'm back at Harbor, and today I'm playing basketball in the parking lot. And I'll tell you why in a second, but until then, listen to this verse from Luke chapter 1. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judah, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that what the Lord has said to her will be accomplished." Grace and peace, my friends. This is a really familiar passage. It's one that we typically read about every Christmas, and it's one that we think we know inside and out. And when you have a passage this familiar, I think one of the good things you can do is to just read it over and over again and kind of run your hands down it like you might a piece of wood and you're sort of looking for a splinter until something sticks out. Some little phrase that you never quite caught. Some little thought from someone in the passage that you never sort of caught before. As I was reading the passage this week, the splinter that I felt was where she says, "Why am I so favored? Why am I so favored?" Another way of saying that more plainly would be, why me? Why me, God? The internet is full of birth announcements and gender reveals. Some of them are really special and funny and meaningful. Others of them have gone a little far. Some of them have become a little too destructive. There's thousands of acres of a national forest a couple years ago that was burned because of a gender reveal where they used sparklers, and it burned down lots of forest. But this particular birth announcement with Mary from Gabriel is neither destructive or meaningful. It's not sentimental. It's not bad. It's perplexing for Mary. Because in the passage with Gabriel and then with Elizabeth, she expresses wonderment and surprise, and she's pondering this question, why am I the one who gets chosen? Why me? Those of you who know me well know I am a huge college basketball fan, and my favorite team is UNC. And I kind of go nuts for them. And for the last 4 years, there's been this player that's been a little bit frustrating for me. Every time he comes in the game, I'm like, why? Why does he come in the game? It's a guy by the name of Andrew Platek. Andrew Platek, what does he do? He can't rebound. He can't score. He can't pass. He can't shoot. He's not athletic. What does he do? He has no discernible skills on the basketball court. He is not very good. And every time he comes to the game, and he has played a lot in his career at UNC, every time he comes in the game, I'm like, why Roy Williams? Why is Andrew Platek in the game right now? But alas, until recently, I looked at a particular stat, a little known metric called the plus minus. The plus minus is what sets him above everybody else. And let me tell you, there's this guy on the bench next to him who's 7'1", 245. He's got great touch around the rim. He is a way better player than Andrew Platek. But what sets him apart is this thing called the plus minus. The plus minus is this measurement of how your team does when you're in the game. So if your plus minus is plus 20, that means that your team did outperform the other team by 20 points when you were in the game. If it was minus 30, that means your team didn't do well at all when you were in the game. But even though Andrew Platek has no discernible basketball skills, when he is in the game, the team always does really well. His plus minus is always the highest on the team. That's why he plays. I think it's worth considering what your plus minus would be. Do you make other people around you better? Or when you are around others, is it about your ego, about what you want to say, about your needs and not theirs? Do you make others better? Now, as good Protestants, we know that it is faith, not works, that gets us into heaven. Faith is the bedrock of our salvation. However, what we do in this life matters, and it is worth considering what your plus minus would be. Are the people around you in your orbit, are the people who know you, are they better for having known you? Do you make others better? Though we hear this story every year, it's always an important detail to remember that Mary was a nobody in that culture. Not only was she a teenage girl, which puts her about 10 rungs behind any male, she was also very poor. She was from Nazareth, which was a real kind of podunk town. It's kind of like the Spivey's Corner of Israel. Spivey's Corner, if you've never driven through Spivey's Corner, is a one-stoplight town. And they used to be known for the national hollering contest, and it kind of made them a joke with the rest of the country. And that's what Nazareth was. It was a joke. Nazareth was a place that people made fun of. In fact, in John 1, one of Jesus' disciples said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And so not only was she poor, but she also had no discernible skills. The scriptures don't say anything about Mary and her skills or her talents or anything she does well. She's not this natural leader. She's not an inspiring artist. She's not this, poetic orator. She doesn't have any discernible skills. Yet, the scriptures say that God chose her. In that society, the only thing that would give Mary value to the rest of the world would be her reproductive system. Why did God pick me? It's a fair question within the context that she's living in at the time. But in God's kingdom, it's a little bit different. God put her in the game for a reason. A few years ago, I heard Bishop Will Willimon speak. He's a great speaker. I've heard him many times, and I've read a lot of his books. But the most honest thing he's ever said was this. Several years ago, he was a pastor of a church, and he had a good ministry there, and then he left to go somewhere else. And when a few months later, some of his parishioners called him up and said, "Will, we miss you so bad. Everything has just fallen apart since you've left." And he said his ego just ate that up. He's like, "Well, yeah, that's what happens when you lose the star player on your team." But then the part of him that's made in God's image stepped in and said, "Hold on. The church became worse after I left, then I didn't do my job. Instead of making them a better church, I made them dependent upon me." And a wave of conviction swept over him. And he realized that he was this star player, but kind of like in basketball, when the best player in a team gets the ball, sometimes the other people just sort of stand and watch. I think sometimes we underestimate our need to feel needed. I think that tends to dominate some of our relationships. We tend to help others for the purpose of making ourselves feel good, not for the sole purpose of actually lifting them up and building them up and making them better. It reminds me of King Herod in that day with Christ and his birth. King Herod was a phenomenal leader. He was a great leader. He had a natural leadership ability, and he built all of these great structures and all of these great cities when he was around. But his plus minus was really low. He couldn't stand for someone else to have success. If anyone in his orbit had any talents or any sort of natural leadership ability, he would kill him because he only wanted success for himself and not for others. If there was someone in his orbit who wanted justice, you had to go plead and beg for Herod just to get a little ounce of justice. If there was someone who wanted a little bit of extra wealth, just to get by in life, you had to go and you had to flatter King Herod and make him feel good about himself. That was the kind of guy he was. His plus minus was so low. There was a vast chasm between Herod and Mary and Joseph and Zechariah and Elizabeth. And so as we celebrate the humility of Mary and Elizabeth, I want us also to consider, what is our plus minus? Do we build up the other people in our lives, or do we use them to feed our ego, to affirm our agendas, to meet our needs? Or do we put our needs last so that we can help meet their needs? Someone who really typified that was my mother-in-law, Lib. But it's been a sad week for my family and I because we lost her on Thursday morning. She passed away in kind of a sudden way. And so on Wednesday evening, late Wednesday evening, as we were driving as a family to say our final goodbyes to her at Wake Med in Raleigh, I was talking with Lindsay about how I will remember her. A few years ago, she was thriving, and every Sunday evening, she would drive an hour and a half to my church, and she would come and help out with a children's ministry that we had. She was not a leader of the ministry. She didn't have a significant role to play. She would just kind of come and lend a helping hand. Sometimes she would bring crafts and snacks and food, but by and large, she was just a volunteer. And sometimes we would have 20 kids there, sometimes 30, sometimes we'd only have 5. It didn't matter how many kids were there, she was always there. And that's how I remember her. She was someone who had an incredibly high plus minus, who made other people in her orbit better. She always put her own needs last. She always put the needs of other people first. Her name was Liv, and she was really special. I want to say, as I close here, that a lot of you your whole lives have been told that you are bench warmers, that you're not really great at any one thing, that you don't have any discernible talents, that you don't really have a lot of value in the world. And for those reasons, maybe you don't have a lot of confidence. And I want to say, number one, you're not alone, because a lot of us feel that way. But number two, I want to say, and more importantly, is that in God's kingdom, those are the very people God puts into the game for the big shots. Those are the ones that God elevates. It's the downtrodden, the ones who had the rest of the world said had no value. He was the one, those are the ones who were elevated up to do big things in God's kingdom. And so if you're someone who puts the needs of others first, who builds up the people around you as opposed to just using them for your own needs, I want to say that you have immense value in God's kingdom.
Only to bring you peace, only at Christmas time, only the King of Kings, only what once was mine. It takes the end of time, it takes a long, long time, only one thought of Christmas time. He brings us peace, He brings us joy, He brings all thoughts to destroy. Only at Christmas time, to bring us peace, to bring us joy, to bring all thoughts to